What you are about to experience is out of this world. Politics, history, and of course, a lot of entertainment. It's time to rock it with the Docket. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. We are here with our 106th episode of the Dockery Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. And if you are excited to be here as well, make sure to go down below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, so then you never miss one of my videos. So, back in 2020, Joe Biden claimed that he wanted to run for president to bring back the soul of this nation. According to Joe Biden, he wanted to unite the country. He claimed during the speech that he wasn't going to be a Democratic president, but he was going to be an American president. In the Oval Office, Joe Biden would rip off his suit and become Captain Unity. And all this political chaos and division that we saw would just disappear. Joe Biden has worked on uniting the country ever since he stepped into the Oval Office. He has done this by claiming that all the people that didn't take the COVID-19 vaccine were going to have a tough winter of death and destruction. Along with this, making sure that people got fired from their job if they didn't get the vaccine. And also claiming that Republicans are making Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle because of voter ID laws. Joe Biden has more of these things that he's done, but apparently all of the things that I just mentioned didn't bring the country together very well. So Joe Biden had to pull out the big guns and call half the country domestic terrorists. Now, when doing different speeches, one of the most important things to focus on is the setting. And now Joe Biden did a good job on his part for this, as he delivered this speech in front of Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were both signed. However, this speech wasn't inside the building, it was outside, at night, with two blood-red lights that were shining by two Marines. Now, you've probably all seen the pictures, and apparently there's a picture zoomed back. Two sections of the wall are blue, and two are red. But because of how the cameras were facing, all that we saw was black and blood red. Now, my only question is, what was Joe Biden and his handlers thinking? Did they really want Joe Biden to look like an evil supervillain? Because that's exactly what he looks like. Everyone knows that black and red can be mixed, but it is often used for the bad guys in movies and TV shows. In the movie V for Vendetta, the leader speaks in front of a red and black background. The movie that really jumped out to me was Star Wars The Force Awakens, when General Hux is screaming at the stormtroopers. The two leaders almost looked the same. And speaking of Star Wars, have you seen Darth Vader? Black suit, red lightsaber. Joe Biden's speech just looked bad, and it gave me an uneasy feeling, like he was going to declare a civil war or something. We all know that red and black are also the colors of Antifa and another political ideology where the leader had a mustache. All that he's missing is the color white. Now, I will not stoop to the Democrats' lows and claim that Joe Biden is a semi-fascist, which is what Joe Biden did this week.
What we're seeing now is the beginning or the death knell of an extreme MAGA philosophy. It's not just Trump, he said. It's the entire philosophy. It's like semi-fascism, end quote.
Remember, he's promoting unity here. In all seriousness, the lighting doesn't make any difference. It just makes him look like a supervillain. If the speech was actually unifying, then the lighting wouldn't have even mattered at all. No one would have cared. But it was the content of the speech that people are talking about right now. So let's dive into the speech. Joe Biden claims that American democracy is under attack, not by China or Russia, but by evil, terrible MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump himself. Here's Joe Biden saying that.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now, I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans.
This is Joe Biden's first attack on half of the American people, claiming that they are a threat to our democracy. Now you might be thinking, Kyle, that's absolutely ridiculous. Did you not just hear the president speak? He said that not all Republicans are like that. Well, Joe Biden has a test to determine who is an evil, terrible MAGA Republican and who is a good, kind Republican, aka a Democrat in Republican clothes. The test is if you work with Joe Biden and believe what Joe Biden believes, then you are a good Republican. And if you don't, you are a terrible, evil MAGA Republican. Here's Joe Biden pointing this difference out.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards. Backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love.
Once again, this is an attack on average Republicans because most Republicans believe that Roe v. Wade is murder, and most Republicans agreed with the Roe v. Wade being overturned. So if I say that Roe v. Wade should have been overturned and all this stuff should go back to the states, does this mean that I'm a terrible, horrible, evil, racist, MAGA Republican that wants to kill democracy? If I believe that all the things that Joe Biden mentioned are not rights granted by the government, but should be left up to the states, does this mean that I want to end the country as we know it? If I believe in anything different than what Joe Biden says, like a smaller government and maybe an end to spending billions and billions of dollars, am I a terrible person that only likes Donald Trump? Heck, if I voted for Donald Trump, does that mean that I am a MAGA Republican? In Joe Biden's view, yes, because he made it so broad. And in Joe Biden's eyes, you have to agree with him or you are the enemy. Almost like a domestic terrorist. And this is why this stuff is so scary. Because Joe Biden is saying this to all Republicans. As I've already mentioned, in this speech, Joe Biden has claimed that MAGA Republicans are a dangerous threat to our democracy. He says this again, but then he says something that is sort of chilling.
But while the threat to American democracy is real, I want to say as clearly as we can, we are not powerless in the face of these threats. We are not bystanders in this ongoing attack on democracy. There are far more Americans from every background and belief who reject the extreme MAGA ideology than those that accept it.
Biden is saying that he is not powerless when it comes to these MAGA Republicans. The question is, what do you do if someone is threatening you or your country? Well, you use your power to stop these people. Let's say, for example, ISIS. ISIS was a terrible and dangerous threat to our entire world, and they needed to be stopped. So the United States bombed them and tried to stop them. If there were people that were in this country right now that were promoting violence, lighting buildings on fire, or even starting an insurrection, then of course those people should be thrown in jail. But if these people just have Republican beliefs, they shouldn't be thrown in jail. But Joe Biden is saying that they, meaning all Republicans, are the enemy, and they have to be stopped at all costs. This to me sounds like a cult of violence for Joe Biden supporters to go after MAGA Republicans. This is justified because they're evil, semi-fascists that want to destroy democracy. It could also lead to the justification of criminally charging Donald Trump. It's not a political arrest, it's a good arrest, because Donald Trump was an evil MAGA Republican that wanted to destroy democracy. It's not unprecedented. This is very extreme and dangerous rhetoric from the president. But Joe Biden continues his attack on Republicans, claiming that they are leading Americans down the wrong path. As Joe Biden is claiming that there are two paths that Americans can take, and it's kind of ironic. Take a listen.
And now, America must choose to move forward or to move backwards, to build a future or obsess about the past, to be a nation of hope and unity and optimism, or a nation of fear, division, and of darkness. MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
Listen, Joe Biden is obsessed about the past. Everything that is wrong with this country right now isn't Joe Biden's fault, it's Donald Trump's fault. And he loves focusing on that. And he and other Democrats can't get over January 6th. Along with that, he claims that he wants a country of hope and unity and optimism. What this speech doesn't bring any of those things, because it is actually dividing the country. What Joe Biden is doing in this speech is actually what the second part of the quote is. He claims that Republicans are creating a nation of fear, division, and darkness, and they're hiding in the shadows of truth, or whatever he says. Joe Biden is spreading fear right now. He's claiming that half the country is going to kill the other half of the country. They're evil fascists. They want to kill you and our democracy. That also spreads division as well, as we already talked about. And all of this is leading to Joe Biden to spread darkness across this country. It's not just the MAGA Republicans. Maybe the Democrats need to take the plank out of their own eye, and then they can tell us about the speck of dust in our own. As there were many times in this speech that Joe Biden was claiming that the Republicans were doing something, but the Democrats have done that exact same thing as well. And not from 50 years in the past, but literally from 2016 to 2020. For example, Joe Biden says that Republicans don't respect the rule of law and are promoting violence, especially talking about January 6th. Here's that clip.
They look at the mob that stormed the United States Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy, but they look at them as patriots. And they see their MAGA failure to stop a peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election as preparation for the 2022 and 2024 elections.
Now, I will say once again that January 6th was a bad day for this country, and it shouldn't have happened. Many Republicans look at January 6th and say, yeah, that shouldn't have happened, and maybe people that stormed the Capitol and tried to hurt police officers should be thrown in jail. Republicans are willing to admit that January 6th was a terrible day, but Democrats can't admit that they also have promoted violence and have never apologized. There was a literal riot when Donald Trump was inaugurated. People were smashing Starbucks windows. They lit a limousine on fire and called for more violence. No investigation took place and it was swept right underneath the rug. In May of 2020, there were riots outside the White House as people were starting fires, and these rioters were trying to rip down the fence and go into the White House. The riot got so bad that Donald Trump had to be sent down into the White House bunker. And guess what? They made fun of Donald Trump for doing that. But those same people felt bad for AOC on January 6th, even though she was in a totally different building. Listen, this riot was so bad that they even tried to burn down a church. People were more focused on Donald Trump holding up a Bible than focusing on a riot that tried to burn down the church. This day of violence was not condemned by the left, and there was no investigations at all. It was all swept right underneath the rug, like it was no big deal. It was fiery, but mostly peaceful. Then of course we had the Summer of Love, where a group of people literally took over a block and called it Chaz, where there was violence and multiple people got shot, and we just let it happen. Along with that, the BLM protests that were full of rage and violence. Cars were destroyed, businesses were destroyed, people's livelihoods were lost. And ironically, the Black Lives Matter rioters were destroying Black-owned businesses. This violence to the Democrats doesn't matter. This violence was actually justified. We needed this violence to create a better America. This is why when Joe Biden says this,
and this is a nation that rejects violence as a political tool. We do not encourage violence. We are still an America that believes in honesty and decency and respect for others.
I don't believe him one bit. Democrats have called for violence just recently after the Roe v. Wade decision was struck down. Democrats were posting the addresses of the Supreme Court justices. Justice Brett Kavanaugh was almost assassinated by a crazy radical leftist. The DOJ never investigated these different attacks or arrested the people that were illegally protesting outside the judge's house. Once again, it was pushed under the rug, and some even justified it. These politicians think you are stupid, but you aren't. As Joe Biden says, Republicans are calling for violence in the streets.
On top of that, there are public figures today, yesterday, and the day before predicting and all but calling for mass violence and rioting in the streets. This is inflammatory. It's dangerous. It's against the rule of law.
Joe Biden doesn't think that we remember just a few years ago, major Democrats and TV pundits were calling for violence, for people to protest in the street. Luckily, I found a video from Control Politics. Here's that video.
There aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized up to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
We know that ever since Donald Trump was elected, ever since Donald Trump started running for president, they hated him, and they wanted people to go to the streets because apparently he was an evil fascist dictator. And that's why they're going after you, the average Republican, because you're the one that voted for him. You're the one that promoted fascism. You're the one that wants to destroy democracy. I mean, all of this is just ridiculous because Joe Biden is claiming that there is only one political party that is calling for violence. That's not true. It is a lie, and it is only making the temperature hotter in this country. So I agree with Joe Biden when he says this.
We hear, you've heard it, more and more talk about violence as an acceptable political tool in this country. It's not. It can never be an acceptable tool. So I want to say this plain and simple. There is no place for political violence in America, period. None, ever.
Violence is wrong everywhere, but Joe Biden needs to call out both sides. Listen, once again, January 6th was bad and it was a terrible situation for this country. And there are stupid Republicans that are calling for violence as well. But you can't ignore that there has been anger and calls for violence on both sides of the political aisle. If Joe Biden wanted to make a really good uniting speech, he would say, hey, guess what? Democrats and Republicans have both called for political violence, and it is wrong, and it should be stopped 100%. But no, he blames all of the extremism and violence on Republicans, all in the name of unity. Now, a main focus of the speech was Joe Biden talking about how Republicans want to destroy democracy, and that we have to protect our democracy. This was especially important for Joe Biden when it comes to election integrity, as democracy can only live on if we accept the outcome of elections. Here's Joe Biden talking about that.
But democracy endures only if we, the people, respect the guardrails of the republic. Only if we, the people, accept the results of free and fair elections. Only if we, the people, see politics not as total war, but mediation of our differences. Democracy cannot survive when one side believes there are only two outcomes to an election. Either they win or they were cheated.
This means we can't have any more questions about elections, and we have to accept the election no matter what. Democrats, I hope you're listening for the midterms, or any other future election, because once again, Democrats have to look in at their own party. In the 2016 election, Democrats claimed that for 4 years Donald Trump cheated, and he worked with Russia to steal the election. To the Democrats, from 2016 to 2020, Trump was an illegitimate president, and it should have been Hillary Clinton that won. Did you also know, just a little fun fact, that there were Democrats in 2016 that objected to the election results and didn't want to verify the election just like Republicans did in 2020? But I'm sure those Democrats were justified in doing that because Donald Trump was an evil threat to our democracy. Along with that, there were claims that in 2018, the Georgia governor's race was rigged because there was voter suppression. The Democrats believe this lie so much that during the 2020 Democratic Convention, they had a meeting with all the Democratic governors. And guess who was there? Stacey Abrams, the woman from Georgia that lost the election. This also happened in Florida between Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis. Once again, the Democrats claim that there was voter suppression and Gillum should have been the real winner. Going back to presidential elections, Democrats claim that the 2000 election was stolen from them, and it even went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which ruled that George W. Bush was the legit winner of the election. This also happened in the 2004 election between George W. Bush and John Kerry, as there were claims that voter machines were switching votes. And so John Kerry should have been the president. It's almost like when Republicans win, the Democrats always have an excuse. And when the Democrats win, the Republicans always have an excuse. So it's definitely not just one side doing this. And maybe we need to fix our electoral system by knowing who's voting with voter ID. But no, that makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle, according to Joe Biden. In the end, this may be controversial, but I think that Joe Biden, with this speech, became the most divisive president in modern American history. The idea that this president would go out and attack one political party over the other did nothing to unite the country. It will only make things worse for Joe Biden. This speech was a desperate attempt for Joe Biden to change the conversation away from his failures and onto the Republicans and Donald Trump. As during the speech, he didn't mention China, crime, inflation, fentanyl, the border, but he mentioned Charlottesville, January 6th, insurrection, Donald Trump, extremism, violence, MAGA, and Republicans 16 times. Because to him, we are the enemy. Joe Biden is a failure of a president, and he can't admit that, so instead he has to blame everyone else. Now, this isn't the first time that Democrats attacked the whole of the Republican Party. Obama called us bitter clingers. Hillary called us a basket of deplorables. And now Joe Biden is calling us domestic terrorists and semi-fascists. But Donald Trump calls us patriots and Americans. Guess who I'm going to pick in the next election? This is why I believe that the Democrats are doing nothing but creating more Republicans, and it will only hurt them in the future. And with that, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.